Captain Jiwoo floated through the observation deck of the human research station orbiting New Seoul, staring at something that redefined his understanding of what was possible in the universe. The prototype vessel Humanity Rising hung in space before him, its hull seeming to absorb light while energy patterns flowed across its surface like living circuits. "Impressive, isn't it?" said Chief Scientist Hyejin as she joined him at the viewing window. "It represents everything we've learned about fighting the Devourers, combined with technology we've recovered from the ancient battlefields." 3 months had passed since Ambassador Seojin returned to Confederation space with the truth about galactic history. The revelation had shattered governments, ended careers, and forced every species to confront the fact that their peaceful existence was built on a foundation of deliberate ignorance. "How many ships like this do you have?" Jiwoo asked, though he suspected the answer would shock him. 300 completed, with 50 more coming online every month, Hyejin replied casually. "We've been building them for 20 years, ever since we confirmed the Devourers were still out there." Jiwoo shook his head in amazement. The single vessel before him could probably defeat the entire Confederation fleet, and humanity had hundreds of them. It explained why they had been so confident during the diplomatic encounters. "The real breakthrough," Hyejin continued, "was learning to combine our technology with rediscovered ancient systems. The original defenders of the galaxy had some remarkable innovations, but they lacked the manufacturing capacity to build enough ships. We solved that problem. The Humanity Rising began moving through a series of test maneuvers that demonstrated capabilities Jiwoo couldn't have imagined. The ship accelerated to impossible speeds, shifted through dimensions to avoid simulated attacks, and fired weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics." "Captain Jiwoo," a voice called from behind them. They turned to see General Taehyung approaching, wearing the dark blue uniform of humanity's military command. "Thank you for accepting our invitation. We have something important to discuss." General Taehyung led them to a briefing room, where representatives from dozens of species sat around a massive holographic display. Jiwoo recognized many faces from the emergency sessions that had followed Ambassador Seojin's report. The galaxy's leadership had been meeting almost continuously as they struggled to accept the reality of their situation. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," General Taehyung began, "we've gathered here because the Confederation Council has made its decision. They've voted to dissolve the existing governmental structure and form a new galactic defense alliance with humanity as equal partners." The announcement should have been shocking, but after months of revelations about hidden history and approaching danger, nothing seemed impossible anymore. Admiral Young-soo, the same officer who had originally demanded human submission, stood to address the assembly. "The evidence is clear," Admiral Young-soo said, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "The Devourers are returning, and our current military capabilities are completely inadequate. We need humanity's technology and expertise if organic life in this galaxy is going to survive." General Taehyung activated the holographic display, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy with defensive positions marked throughout. "The new alliance will operate on principles of shared command and integrated technology. Every species will contribute their strengths while adopting advanced defensive systems." "What about the technology restrictions?" asked Counselor Haywin, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy. "If we abandon the safety protocols that have maintained peace for centuries—" "The protocols were never about safety," interrupted Dr. Hyun as she joined the briefing. "They were about keeping the galaxy weak enough to avoid attracting attention. That strategy is no longer viable." She activated a section of the display showing deep space monitoring data. "Our long-range sensors have detected the advance elements of the Devourer fleet. They're closer than we initially estimated. We have 43 years, not 50. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 43 years to prepare for a war against enemies that had once required the combined strength of hundreds of advanced civilizations to defeat. However, General Taehyung continued, "We're not starting from zero. The ancient defenders left us detailed records of effective strategies and technologies. Combined with human innovations, we have a real chance of victory." He gestured to Captain Jiwoo. "Captain, you've been selected as one of the first non-human officers to serve aboard a human warship. Your experience with both Confederation protocols and human capabilities makes you ideal for training integrated crews." Jiwoo felt his heart race with excitement and terror in equal measure. The opportunity to serve on ships like the Humanity Rising was beyond anything he could have imagined when this started. The training program will take 2 years, General Taehyung explained. We need officers who understand both command structures and can help bridge the gap between different species' approaches to warfare. Over the following hours, the details of the new alliance took shape. Shipyards across the galaxy would be converted to build vessels using advanced designs. Military academies would teach tactics developed for fighting matter-consuming entities. Research facilities would focus on weapons that could damage enemies from beyond normal space. The most ambitious part of the plan was revealed when Admiral Neon, the human commander who had defeated the Confederation fleet, addressed the assembly via holographic projection from the construction yards. The flagship of our combined fleet is nearing completion, she announced as the display showed a massive vessel under construction. The Defiant Unity represents everything we've learned about building ships that can stand against the Devourers. The ship was enormous, larger than any vessel ever constructed in the galaxy. Its hull incorporated technology from dozens of species, weapon systems that combined human innovation with ancient knowledge, and defensive capabilities that redefined the meaning of protection. She'll be ready for service in 18 months, Admiral Neon continued. With a mixed crew of over 10,000 beings from across the galaxy, working together as one unit. As the briefing concluded, Jiwoo found himself standing once again at the observation window, watching the Humanity Rising complete its test flights. But now he wasn't seeing just one impossible ship. He was seeing the future of galactic defense. Nervous? Asked Dr. Hayan as she joined him. Terrified, Jiwoo admitted. 6 months ago I was a patrol officer enforcing shipping regulations. Now I'm training to fight creatures that eat entire civilizations. The galaxy needed to grow up eventually, Dr. Hayan said gently. Humanity just helped it happen faster than anyone expected. A year later, Captain Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the completed Defiant Unity as Admiral Neon and newly elected Coalition President Kyungmin addressed the galaxy from the ship's main communication center. Behind them, a fleet of over 1,000 vessels represented the largest military force in galactic history. Citizens of the galaxy, President Kyungmin announced, 42 years ago, our ancestors made the difficult decision to limit our development rather than risk another devastating war. Today we make a different choice. Admiral Neon stepped forward. The Devourers are coming, but this time we're ready for them. This time we have the tools, the knowledge, and the unity to protect everything we've built. As the massive fleet began moving into defensive positions throughout the galaxy, Jiwoo reflected on how much had changed since his first encounter with a human warship. The comfortable certainties of Confederation space were gone, replaced by the harsh realities of preparation for war. But something else had replaced them too. For the first time in 50,000 years, the galaxy was united not by fear and limitation, but by hope and determination. The Devourers were coming, but they would find a galaxy that was no longer hiding from the challenges of the universe. The age of deliberate weakness was over. The age of defiant strength had begun. Ambassador Seojin stepped off the transport shuttle onto the surface of New Seoul, humanity's capital world in this sector of space. Around him, a city of gleaming spires rose toward the sky, their architecture unlike anything in Confederation space. The buildings seemed to grow organically from the landscape, combining advanced technology with natural beauty in ways that challenged everything he thought he knew about urban planning. The news of the fleet's defeat had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. 12 Confederation warships disabled by 3 human vessels in less than 5 minutes. Military analysts were calling it impossible. Political leaders were demanding explanations. The entire galactic order was beginning to question itself for the first time in centuries. Ambassador Seojin, said a voice behind him. He turned to see a human woman approaching with confident strides. She was tall and moved with the same controlled grace he had noticed in all the humans he had met. I'm Dr. Hayan, humanity's chief xenoarchaeologist. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Dr. Hayan, Seojin replied with a formal bow. The Confederation is very interested in understanding your people better. Your technological capabilities have raised many questions. I imagine they have, Dr. Hayan said with what seemed like sympathy. I hope we can provide some answers. But I warn you, Ambassador, what you're about to learn will change how you see the galaxy's history. She led him through the city toward a massive research complex that seemed to be built around archaeological sites. Through transparent sections of the buildings, Seojin could see teams of scientists working on artifacts that looked ancient beyond measure. "Tell me, Ambassador," Dr. Heian said as they walked, "what do your people know about the ruins scattered throughout the galaxy? The dead worlds that the Confederation has declared off-limits for research?" Seojin felt a chill at the question. Those sites were among the galaxy's greatest mysteries. Ancient structures on lifeless planets, too dangerous for civilian exploration and too sensitive for public discussion. They're archaeological sites of unknown origin, very old and potentially hazardous. "They're graveyards," Dr. Heian said quietly. "Monuments to a war that nearly ended all organic life in the galaxy 50,000 years ago." She stopped in front of a massive display showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots marked hundreds of locations throughout known space. Seojin recognized many of them as the forbidden archaeological sites. Every one of these worlds was once populated. Dr. Heian continued. Advanced civilizations with billions of inhabitants. They were destroyed in a war against an enemy so terrible that the survivors chose to forget it ever happened. "What enemy?" Seojin asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "Your people call them the Void Hunters, though that's not their real name. The ancient records call them the Devourers. They come from the space between galaxies, traveling in ships that consume matter itself to fuel their journey. They don't just destroy civilizations, they erase them completely." Dr. Heian touched the display and it zoomed in on one of the red dots. "This is what remains of the Kethran Empire. 500 worlds reduced to lifeless rock in less than a decade. The Kethrans were more advanced than your current confederation, but they fell just like all the others." Seojin stared at the display in horror. The Kethran Empire was mentioned in the oldest historical records as a vanished civilization of incredible power. To learn they had been destroyed by external invaders was shocking enough. To realize the same fate had befallen hundreds of other civilizations was almost too much to comprehend. "How do you know all this?" he asked. "Because we've been to those worlds," said a new voice. Seojin turned to see Commander Minho approaching, wearing the uniform of Human Intelligence Services. "We've excavated the ruins, decoded the records, and pieced together what really happened." Dr. Heian activated another section of the display. The war lasted 3,000 years. Every major civilization in the galaxy united to fight the Devourers. They won, barely, but the cost was so terrible that the survivors made a decision that shaped everything that came after. "What decision?" Seojin asked, though he was beginning to understand. Commander Minho answered. "They decided that their descendants should never become powerful enough to attract the Devourers' attention again. The technology restrictions, the regulated ship designs, the careful limitations on exploration, none of it was about maintaining peace. It was about keeping the galaxy weak and hidden." The words hit Seojin like a physical blow. The entire foundation of Confederation civilization was based on fear of an enemy they had chosen to forget. "That's impossible." "The Confederation Council would never." "The Council doesn't know," Dr. Heian said gently. "The knowledge was deliberately hidden. Only a few ancient families maintained the records, and they passed down instructions to keep the galaxy limited without explaining why." She activated another display showing archaeological evidence from dozens of worlds. "We found the proof in ruins across the galaxy, secret facilities where the ancient survivors gathered to plan their descendants' future. They created the technological restrictions and built them into the foundation of what became your confederation." Commander Minho stepped forward with a data tablet. "Ambassador, I need to show you something that will be hard to accept. The encounters we've had with the creatures you call Void Hunters weren't random. They were scouts. The main Devourer fleet has been traveling through dark space for 50 millennia, and they're almost here." The tablet displayed astronomical data that made Seojin's blood run cold. Deep space monitoring stations had detected gravitational anomalies moving through the void between galaxies. The patterns matched ancient records of Devourer fleet movements. "How long do we have?" Seojin asked quietly. 50 years, Commander Minho replied. "Maybe less if they've improved their travel speed." Dr. Heian touched his arm gently. "Ambassador, this is why humanity developed advanced technology. We found evidence of the ancient war during our early space exploration. We realized the galaxy was living under restrictions designed to keep it weak, and we chose a different path. We've been preparing for this war for 2 centuries. Commander Minho added. "Every ship we build, every weapon we develop, every alliance we form, It's all focused on being ready when the Devourers return. Seojin looked around the research facility with new understanding. The humans hadn't been developing technology for conquest or expansion. They had been building the tools necessary to fight an enemy that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten existed. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" he asked. "Would you have believed us?" Dr. Hayon asked sadly. "Your entire civilization is built on the principle that advanced technology is dangerous. How could we convince you that the real danger was staying weak?" Commander Minho activated a final display showing the current state of human military preparation. "We have 300 warships designed specifically to fight Devourers. We've developed weapons that can damage matter-consuming hulls and shields that can resist entropy beams. We've been training for a war the rest of the galaxy doesn't know is coming. But we can't win alone," Dr. Hayon added. "The ancient records are clear about that. It took the combined strength of hundreds of civilizations to defeat the Devourers last time. If the galaxy faces them divided and weak, organic life in this galaxy will end." Seojin stood in silence, processing everything he had learned. The comfortable order of Confederation space suddenly seemed fragile and false. The peaceful restrictions that had maintained stability for centuries were actually a trap that would doom them all. "What do you need from us?" he asked finally. "Everything," Commander Minho replied. "We need every ship, every world, every species working together to survive what's coming. The Confederation has to choose between maintaining comfortable limitations or preparing for the fight of our lives." As Ambassador Seojun prepared to return to Confederation, space with the most important message in galactic history, he realized that humanity's first gift to the galaxy wasn't advanced technology or military might. It was the truth about their past and the knowledge they needed to survive their future. The question now was whether the galaxy would accept that truth in time to act on it. Fleet Admiral Sunho stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Eternal Order, watching as 11 other heavy cruisers took their positions around his flagship. Each ship represented the finest military technology the Confederation had developed over 3 centuries. Together they formed the most powerful fleet ever assembled for a single operation. "Admiral," reported Tactical Officer Dongwu from his station, "all ships are in position. We have enough firepower here to level a small moon. These humans may have advanced technology, but they can't possibly stand against this much force." Sunho nodded grimly. He had studied every piece of data from the diplomatic meeting. The humans possessed impressive technology, but they were still just one species with a handful of ships. The Confederation represented the combined military might of dozens of civilizations. "Remember," he announced over the fleet communication channel, "we're not here to destroy them. This is a show of force designed to bring them to the negotiating table. If they surrender immediately, we'll escort them to Confederation space for proper integration." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory, expecting to find a small defensive force that would quickly realize the futility of resistance. Instead, they found 3 ships waiting for them in perfect formation. Dongwu stared at his instruments in confusion. "Admiral, I'm only detecting 3 vessels." "But the energy readings—" "Sir, these numbers can't be correct. What are you seeing?" Sunho demanded. "Each of those ships is generating more power than our entire fleet combined," Dongwu replied, his voice tight with disbelief. "Their shields are operating on principles I don't recognize, and their weapons. Admiral, I can't even identify their weapon systems." The lead human ship opened a communication channel. "Confederation fleet, this is Admiral Neon aboard the Indomitable Will. I assume you're here to discuss our earlier conversation with your diplomats." Sunho activated his own communications. "Human vessel, I am Fleet Admiral Sunho of the Confederation Defense Force. You are ordered to surrender immediately and submit to Confederation authority. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force." There was a pause before Admiral Neon responded. Her voice carried a calm confidence that sent chills down Sunho's spine. "Admiral Sunho, I'm going to assume this is a misunderstanding. You have 30 seconds to reverse course before we interpret your presence as an act of aggression. You're outnumbered 4-1, Sunho shouted into the comm. "You're 3 ships against our entire fleet. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." "Admiral," came the human's voice again, and Sunho could swear he heard amusement in it. "You're not outnumbered. You're outgunned. This is your final warning." Sunho looked around his bridge at the shocked faces of his crew. No one had ever spoken to Confederation forces this way. No one had ever been able to speak to them this way. All ships, he ordered over the fleet channel, assume attack formation. If they want a demonstration of Confederation power, we'll give them one they'll never forget. The 12 ships of the enforcement fleet spread into their standard attack pattern, their weapons charged with enough energy to crack a planet's surface. Their shields reinforced to deflect any possible counterattack. It was a formation that had never failed in 3 centuries of galactic peace enforcement. Admiral Naon's voice returned, and now it carried what sounded like genuine sadness. Very well. All ships, you're about to see what humanity calls proportional response. The engagement began when the Eternal Order fired its main battery at the lead human ship. The massive energy beam should have vaporized any known vessel. Instead, it simply disappeared into the human ship's shields without causing any visible damage. Impossible, Dongwu screamed from his station. Direct hit with no effect. Their shields are absorbing everything. Before Sunho could respond, the human ships began to move. They didn't accelerate gradually like normal vessels. They simply shifted from stationary to impossible speeds in the blink of an eye. The Confederation targeting systems couldn't track them. The first human ship materialized next to the cruiser Vigilant Guard and fired something that looked like controlled lightning. The cruiser's shields collapsed instantly and every system on the ship went dark. It hung motionless in space, completely disabled but otherwise undamaged. What just happened? Sunho demanded. Unknown weapon effect, Dongwu reported, his voice cracking with stress. The Vigilant Guard is completely powerless, but their hull is intact. No casualties detected. The second human ship appeared above the heavy cruiser Iron Resolve and fired a beam of silver energy that passed through the ship's shields as if they didn't exist. Every weapon system on the cruiser simply stopped working, leaving it defenseless but alive. The third human ship moved through the Confederation formation like a dancer, dodging every shot fired at it while systematically disabling ship after ship with weapons that seemed to ignore every known law of physics. All ships, concentrate fire, Sunho ordered desperately. Focus everything on one target. 7 remaining cruisers turned their full firepower on the closest human vessel. The combined energy output should have been enough to destroy a small space station. The human ship simply sat motionless in the middle of the bombardment, its shields glowing with absorbed energy. When the barrage ended, the human ship was completely undamaged. Worse, it seemed to have stored the energy from the attack because it began glowing brighter than before. Admiral, Dongwu whispered, they're not just blocking our attacks, they're feeding on them. The human ship released the stored energy in a single pulse that washed over the remaining Confederation vessels. Every system on every ship simply stopped working. Engines died, weapons powered down, and shields collapsed. In less than 5 minutes, the most powerful fleet in Confederation history had been reduced to helpless metal drifting in space. Admiral Naon's voice returned over the communication system, now broadcast on all frequencies so every ship could hear. Admiral Sunho, your fleet is disabled but unharmed. We've taken no lives because this was a misunderstanding, not a war. Your crews are safe and your ships can be repaired. Sunho stared at his dead control panels in complete shock. Around him, his bridge crew sat in stunned silence. Nothing in their training had prepared them for this. However, Admiral Naon continued, I want to make something very clear to your Confederation. Humanity is willing to talk, but we don't negotiate from positions of weakness. If you want to discuss our relationship, send diplomats next time. If you send more fleets, we'll treat them as acts of war. The human ships began to withdraw, moving with the same impossible grace they had shown during the battle. As they prepared to enter hyperspace, Admiral Naon made one final transmission. Admiral Sunho, when you report back to your superiors, tell them something important. What you just witnessed wasn't humanity at war. This was humanity being polite. If you want to see what we look like when we're actually trying to win a fight, keep sending fleets instead of diplomats. The 3 human ships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving 12 disabled Confederation vessels floating helplessly in empty space. It would take 6 hours for rescue ships to arrive, giving the crews plenty of time to think about what they had just experienced. As Sunho waited in the darkness of his powerless bridge, he realized that everything the Confederation thought it knew about military power had just become obsolete. The humans hadn't just won a battle. They had proven that the galaxy's entire understanding of warfare was 3 centuries out of date. The age of Confederation dominance was over. The only question now was what would replace it. Captain Jiwoo stared at the star charts floating above his command console. The bridge of the Harmony's edge hummed quietly around him as his crew worked at their stations. For 12 years he had patrolled these same routes through the Outer Rim territories. The work was routine, predictable, and safe, just the way the Galactic Confederation liked it. "Nothing to report, Captain," said Navigator Minji from her position near the front of the bridge. Her blue skin gleamed under the soft lights as she checked the sensor readings. "All shipping lanes are clear. No violations detected." Jiwoo nodded and leaned back in his chair. The Confederation had ruled the galaxy for 300 years, keeping peace through strict rules and careful control. Every ship followed the same basic designs. Every weapon used approved technology. Every faster-than-light drive operated within safe parameters. It was a system that worked. Weapons Officer Taman turned from his console, his forearms moving gracefully as he adjusted the controls. "Captain, should we continue to the next checkpoint? Our patrol schedule shows we're due at the Kepler sector in 6 hours. "Yes, maintain course," Jiwoo replied. The Kepler sector was on the very edge of known space, where the Confederation's authority grew thin. Smugglers sometimes tried to use those empty systems to avoid customs checks. It was one of the few places where patrol officers like him might actually encounter something interesting. Engineer So-young's voice crackled through the comm system from the engine room. "Captain, all systems are running perfectly. Energy output is steady, shields are at full power, and the hyperspace drive is ready for jump when you give the word." Jiwoo had served with this crew for 5 years. They came from different worlds and different species, but they all shared one thing in common. They believed in the Confederation's mission of peace and order. The galaxy had seen too many wars in the past. The current system might be strict, but it prevented the chaos and destruction that had once torn civilizations apart. The ship jumped to hyperspace with a familiar lurch. Through the view screen, stars became streaks of light as they traveled faster than light itself. But even this incredible technology was carefully regulated. The Confederation scientists had determined the safest possible speed for hyperspace travel. Going faster was forbidden because it was dangerous. The rules existed for good reasons. 2 hours later, they dropped back into normal space at the edge of the Kepler sector. Jiwoo expected to see the usual collection of asteroids, distant planets, and maybe a few cargo ships making their way between systems. Instead, his sensors immediately began screaming warnings. "Captain!" Minji's voice was sharp with alarm. "I'm detecting a vessel moving at impossible speeds. It's not following any known hyperspace lane, and its velocity is..." She paused, checking her readings again. "Captain, this can't be right. Nothing can move that fast." Jiwoo stood up and walked to her station. The numbers on her screen made no sense. The unknown ship was traveling at speeds that should have torn it apart. The energy readings were unlike anything in their databases. "Are you certain these readings are accurate?" "I've run diagnostics 3 times, Minji replied. "The sensors are working perfectly. Captain, this ship is using technology that shouldn't exist." Taman's voice joined the conversation from the weapons station. "Captain, I'm also detecting unusual energy signatures. The ship's weapon systems are completely unknown to me. They don't match any approved Confederation designs." Jiwoo felt a chill run down his spine. In 3 centuries, the Confederation had cataloged every possible ship design and weapon system. They maintained strict records of all approved technology. Any deviation from approved specifications was illegal and punishable by severe sanctions. "Put the ship on main screen," he ordered. The view screen shimmered and displayed the unknown vessel. Jiwoo's breath caught in his throat. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its hull was angular and aggressive, covered in surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. Strange energy patterns flowed along its surface like living things. Most disturbing of all, it showed no signs of the mandatory compliance chips that every galactic vessel was required to carry. "Captain," So-young's voice came through the comm, filled with confusion. "I'm reading power output levels that should be impossible. This ship is generating more energy than a Confederation battlecruiser, but it's only half the size." Jiwoo returned to his command chair and activated the communication system. "Unknown vessel. This is Captain Jiwoo of the Confederation patrol ship Harmony's Edge. You are operating in violation of galactic shipping regulations. Please identify yourself and prepare for inspection." For several long moments there was only silence. Then the communication system crackled to life with a response in a language that made their universal translators struggle to keep up. "Confederation vessel. This is Commander Hyunwoo of the human colonial Navy ship Defiant Dawn. We appreciate your contact, but we are operating in free space according to our navigation charts. Jiwoo stared at the comm system in shock. The word human appeared nowhere in the Galactic Species database. He had never heard of any human colonial navy. Most importantly, no ship in the galaxy was allowed to operate without Confederation authority. Commander Hyunwoo, Jiwoo replied carefully, I must inform you that there is no such thing as free space within Confederation territory. All vessels must comply with galactic regulations. Please transmit your registration codes and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Another pause. Then the alien voice returned with what sounded almost like amusement. Captain Jiwoo, I think there may be some confusion here. Humanity doesn't recognize any authority we didn't choose to join. We've been operating in this region of space for quite some time without interference. The words hit Jiwoo like a physical blow. No one spoke to Confederation authority that way. No one had the power to ignore galactic law. The entire system depended on universal compliance with approved technology and recognized authority. Commander, Jiwoo said, trying to keep his voice steady, you may not be aware of the situation, but this entire galaxy operates under Confederation law. There are no exceptions. Your ship is using prohibited technology and operating without proper authorization. Captain? The human's voice remained polite but firm. I understand your position, but humanity operates under different principles. We don't ask permission to exist, and we don't limit our technology based on someone else's fears. Jiwoo looked around his bridge at his crew's shocked faces. In their entire careers, none of them had encountered anything like this. Ships that ignored galactic law, technology that exceeded approved limits, a species that claimed independence from the system that governed all known life. As the two ships faced each other across the emptiness of space, Jiwoo realized he was witnessing something that would change everything. The careful order that had maintained galactic peace for 3 centuries was about to be challenged by forces he couldn't understand. The unknown ship waited silently, its impossible technology humming with barely contained power. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Jiwoo began to wonder if everything he had believed about the galaxy was about to prove wrong. Admiral Young-soo stood in the emergency session chamber at Confederation Central Command, watching the footage from Captain Jiwoo's encounter for the 5th time. Around the circular table, representatives from 12 major species sat in stunned silence. The images on the holographic display showed impossible things that challenged everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. Run the technical analysis again, ordered Counselor Haewon, her tentacles twitching with nervous energy. As head of the Technology Review Board, she had spent decades ensuring that all galactic vessels followed approved specifications. The human ship violated every single regulation. The display showed energy readings that made no sense. The human vessel's power output exceeded anything in their databases. Its hull materials seemed to absorb sensor scans instead of reflecting them. Most disturbing of all, the ship showed no signs of the regulatory systems that every galactic vessel was required to install. How is this possible? Asked Defense Minister Kyung-soo, his scaled hands gripping the edge of the table. We've monitored every technological development in the galaxy for 3 centuries. No species has the capability to build something like this. Admiral Young-soo shook his head slowly. According to our records, no species called humans exists anywhere in known space. Yet this Commander Hyunwoo speaks our language and seems familiar with galactic politics. Where did they come from? The answer to that question would have to wait. 3 days after the initial encounter, Commander Hyunwoo had agreed to a formal diplomatic meeting. The location was Neutral Station Alpha, a small facility in empty space designed for exactly this type of first contact situation. Admiral Young-soo led the Confederation delegation personally. He brought his best diplomats, scientists, and military advisors. They prepared for every possible scenario except the one that actually happened. The human shuttle that docked with the station was as unusual as their warship. Its design followed no known engineering principles, yet it moved through space with perfect control. When the airlock opened, Admiral Young-soo got his first look at a human being. Commander Hyunwoo was tall, even by galactic standards. He moved with a fluid grace that suggested both confidence and controlled strength. His appearance was similar to several known species, but something about his presence felt different. Behind him walked a younger human introduced as Lieutenant Jin Young, who carried himself with the quiet alertness of a trained scientist. Admiral Young-Soo, Commander Hyunwoo said with a slight bow. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I hope we can clear up any misunderstandings between our peoples. The Confederation delegation took their seats around the meeting table. Admiral Young-Soo had conducted first contact sessions before, but they usually involved primitive species just discovering space travel. This felt completely different. Commander Hyunwoo, the Admiral began carefully. Our records show no previous contact with your species. When did humanity first achieve interstellar travel? About 200 years ago, Hyunwoo replied casually. The answer sent shockwaves around the table. 200 years was barely enough time for most species to develop basic space technology. It had taken the founding members of the Confederation over 1,000 years to perfect safe interstellar travel. That's impossible, stated Chief Scientist Da-hyun. The technological development required for faster-than-light travel takes at least 5 centuries. How did you accomplish it so quickly? Lieutenant Jin-young leaned forward with interest. Actually, we found the standard approach used by most galactic species to be unnecessarily conservative. By removing artificial limitations and pursuing more aggressive research, we were able to compress the development timeline significantly. Artificial limitations. Admiral Young-Soo felt a cold sensation in his stomach. What do you mean? Well, Jin-young continued, your technology regulations prevent experimentation with high-energy physics, restrict computer processing power, and forbid research into dimensional manipulation. We wondered why, so we ignored those restrictions and made rapid progress. The room fell silent. Those weren't restrictions. They were safety measures put in place after countless disasters in the early days of galactic civilization. Every schoolchild learned about the dangers of uncontrolled technological development. Commander, said Counselor Haywin, her voice tight with concern. Those regulations exist for good reasons. Uncontrolled experimentation has led to the destruction of entire worlds. The approved technological path is safe and proven. Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. We understand your perspective, Counselor. But humanity has a different philosophy. We believe that avoiding risk entirely often creates greater dangers in the long run. What do you mean? Asked Admiral Young-Soo. Has the Confederation ever encountered the Void Hunters? Hyunwoo asked quietly. The name sent chills through every representative at the table. The Void Hunters were creatures of legend, mentioned in ancient texts but generally considered myths. They were supposed to be monsters from dark space that devoured entire civilizations. Those are stories, said Defense Minister Kyung-soo. Ancient fears given form in old legends. We thought so too, Lieutenant Jin-young said, until we started exploring the far reaches of space. We've encountered them 17 times in the past 50 years. They're real, they're aggressive, and they're heading toward the galactic core. The silence that followed was complete. Admiral Young-Soo felt the careful order of his universe beginning to crumble. You've actually fought these creatures? We've defeated them, Hyunwoo corrected. Our ships and weapons are specifically designed to handle threats that conventional galactic technology can't touch. That's why we don't follow your technological restrictions. Chief Scientist Da-hyun leaned forward with desperate intensity. Show us your evidence. Provide data on these encounters. If what you're saying is true, the entire galaxy needs to know. We'll be happy to share our information, Hyunwoo replied. But first, we need to address the immediate situation. Admiral Young-Soo, your government has demanded that humanity submit to Confederation authority. That's not going to happen. The words hung in the air like a challenge that could not be ignored. Admiral Young-Soo had been authorized to offer the humans junior membership in the Confederation, with the understanding that they would accept technological limitations and regulatory oversight. Commander, he said carefully, the Confederation has maintained galactic peace for 3 centuries. Our system works because everyone follows the same rules. We can't make exceptions, even for advanced species. Then we have a problem, Hyunwoo said with what sounded like genuine regret. Humanity doesn't ask permission to exist. We don't limit our capabilities based on other people's fears. And we certainly don't submit to authority we had no voice in creating. The meeting continued for 6 more hours, but the fundamental issue never changed. The Confederation required submission to galactic law. Humanity refused to accept any authority they hadn't chosen to join. When the session finally ended, Admiral Young-Soo made one last attempt at diplomacy. Commander, if you refuse to accept Confederation authority, you're forcing us to consider other options. We have responsibilities to the galactic community. Hyunwoo stood and extended his hand in what appeared to be a human gesture of respect. Admiral, I understand your position. But before you make any decisions, I want you to consider something. If humanity developed this level of technology in 2 centuries without help, what do you think we've been building for the past 50 years, while fighting creatures your people think are myths? As the human delegation prepared to leave, Admiral Youngsoo realized he was facing a choice that would define the next chapter of galactic history. The humans had made their position clear. They would not submit to Confederation authority under any circumstances. The question now was whether the galaxy's established order would risk everything to enforce compliance, or whether 3 centuries of careful control was about to end forever. Looking at the impossible readings from the human ship, Admiral Youngsoo suspected he already knew the answer.